Former Health Secretary Matt Hancock has denied revelations from his own ghostwriter that he rejected advice to test all residents going to care homes for COVID during the first wave of the pandemic.
Well, one man who knows a thing or two about Westminster drama is the journalist, legendary broadcaster Jon Snow, who has been covering politics for almost 50 years.
Really, that long? Oh, how awful.
You have a lot of experience. You have a book out, John, The State of Us, the good news and the bad news about our society. So that makes two books that we're discussing this morning. The key thing about Matt Hancock is he worked with a ghostwriter. I very much doubt that you did.
I'm afraid I didn't.
And the safest thing about not working with a ghostwriter is that they then don't reveal everything that you left out of the book, which is what Isabel Oakeshott appears to have done. She'd had access to all of Matt Hancock's WhatsApp messages over the course of the pandemic, wrote the pandemic diaries with him, and now, in The Telegraph, has decided to reveal stuff about whether he overruled Professor Chris Whitty over testing on people going into care homes.
There it is,
there we
writ
go.
large.
Yeah, you covered the pandemic, sometimes from your own home because of, you know, the fear of transmission. It was a very sensitive and actually tense time, wasn't it?
Very, very tense, and something we were never prepared for. I mean, other people's countries might suffer these sort of terrible setbacks. You might be in darkest Africa or whatever. But the idea that a Western power would succumb so badly, it was very badly handled, there's no question, politically.
Yeah. One of the things that Isabel Oakeshott says that justifies her revelations and claims is that it is taking so long to set up the inquiry, that Sweden has already completed its inquiry. France is, you know, pretty well underway, so is Italy. It does feel, doesn't it, as broadcasters who covered it, we need the actual truth now, not just what we've been told.
Well, and the fact is that, you know, there was mass suffering in this country from that particular... None of us had lived through a pandemic before. And it was an event that required immediate lessons to be learned in case it ever happens again. But it's so slothful. I mean, if they're not already researching it now on a massive scale, then think how long it's going to be between now and publication and having any kind of account to learn from. I think it's woeful, and it's letting the citizen down.
Your book focuses on inequality.
Yeah.
And the pandemic revealed some of that inequality to us. But you are particularly focused on an event back in 2017, which you think really tragically illustrated the different ways that communities are treated, and that is the Grenfell Tower disaster. And, you know, we all remember it vividly, but you actually knew someone who was in the tower, although you hadn't realised at the time. I
did, and her name was Firdaus, and she was 12 years old. And she was way up on the 22nd floor. And she perished in the fire. And, I mean, it was so obvious. Here we were in a building that everyone had seen from the Westway motorway for years, that was owned by the richest borough in Britain. And this child, for me, summed up absolutely the worst of irresponsibility. She was an immensely gifted child that I met through a prize-giving whatever.
She'd won a debating competition and been awarded a prize by Bill Gates.
Indeed, indeed. And I wrote to Bill Gates and he wrote to a surviving member of the family. But, I mean, it's devastating, devastating. Here we had somebody from very humble beginnings who had immense promise, a really gifted child, and, you know, in amongst this terrible disaster, the death of this really promising child.
Do you think we do well enough?
I mean, it's difficult when you're a reporter to remain sort of dispassionate when you realise that somebody you met and you spoke to was one of the victims.
When you think of COVID and all the lives which are lost and the disaster of Grenfell and the lives which are lost, do we as a society do well enough at going back and having inquiries and understanding what happened and who's to blame and learning the lessons, or do you think we try and brush it under the carpet?
Well, I think what we like to do is to dilly and dally and wait, and we announced some impressive names. We're going to look into it and all the rest of it, so that by the time there is a report, it's so far distant from the actual event and people's vivid memories of it that you have to kind of re-wake people up as to what actually happened. And you sort of neutralise it. And that's a political trick,
That's not good
which you guys know.
Well, this is a rather surreal moment for me because, you know, I have been interviewed by you so many times and I've never, ever had the chance to ask questions to you before.
Turning the tables.
I know, it's
Well,
so
I must
hard
say
to...
you're
but
very civil. I mean, it's extraordinary. Given the terrible treatment we've given you.
Do you want to take some
We've beaten
revenge?
you up.
No, I don't.
Actually, you were an impossible man to beat up.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Why?
You were too tough, too bright. I'm sorry about that, but there you are. You do have a very good intellect.
The thing
I hate to have to tell a politician that they were some good.
You know that he's just charming you out of asking the difficult questions, isn't he?
You were real good. You were a lovely person and in real life. And
Thank you.
And not a bad politician either.
Well, you former politician. Fortunately,
That's
I lost my
calling
seat.
from me.
That's what goes on. But when you think back about interviewing politicians, what is the times when you liked interviewing a politician, and what frustrates you most about interviewing politicians?
I always liked interviewing a politician. It almost invariably ended in failure. But I mean, I liked interviewing a politician because you had a joust, and people like you had, forgive me using the word, the balls to, you know, give as good as you got. And so it was a real joust, and you, I think, you got to some semblance of truth.
Yeah.
What about Margaret Thatcher?
Margaret Thatcher, she was a joy. I mean, absolute joy. I mean, politically, I can now confess that I wasn't necessarily politically aligned with her. But as a journalist, I mean, first of all, she respected our trade. She recognised that we had a job to do. So you didn't feel that you were walking into some, you know, precious garden and that you had no right to be there and all the rest of it. No, she made you welcome and she engaged with you, but she flirted with you too.
And how did that happen?
Well, I know you know, she was a woman and you were a man. I mean, all I'm saying is that she was a woman.
But also journalistically, in an interview, men can flirt with men as well. It doesn't have to be...
Of course.
In a kind of romance sense.
Yeah, it's about I guess my question was the state of us. I couldn't work out. I think of you as an optimist. I wondered whether it was a pessimistic book or an optimistic book. When you think back over your 50 years, even despite the inequality and the divisions in our society, the chances of somebody from a working class background or a woman or a person of colour advancing in our society are immeasurably better than they were.
Oh, they are.
50 years. Have we progressed or...
But look, it's not time to sit back on our laurels. The fact is we've not arrived yet. There's still much, much more to do. There's still some very poor people in this country who need a leg up. And there are, you know, there are all sorts of provisions where I'm very proud of the NHS. I think the services are absolutely fantastic in health. They're not bad in education either, but more can be done.
A lot done, a lot more to do.
Sure.
Our 2001 election slogan, you've got a 2-year-old son. I get the feeling that you're going to go on and on and on. You've got loads more campaigning and work and journalism to do, haven't you?
I hope so. I mean, I don't know why people give up and, you know, pack their bags and say, OK, get me the tombstone and I'll sit beneath it fairly soon. I've
done a career shift, though. I've gone from politics to presenting on television.
Yeah.
30 years presenting Channel 4 News. Maybe it's the time to write your manifesto, get out on the stump and actually put your money where your mouth is, write the book, stand for election, change the world. Over to you, Mr. Snow.
I think that might be too late, simply because I don't think people take 75-year-olds on
Joe
as
Biden?
parliamentary.
How old is Joe Biden?
I am your parliamentary candidate. I know it's a 5-year term. I'm only 75, for God's sake. I mean, there's no chance of me dying in that period. Yes,
Joe Biden is older than you.
Now,
He's about to stand, it looks like, to be a president of the United States for another 4 years.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, Donald Trump was same age as you when he became president of the United States. Go on.
Well, it doesn't work quite like that here.
It doesn't.
I mean, you know better than I do, Ed. You're just because I've given you a rough time in the past.
Well, do you know what, John? It's great to see you. You know,
Fabulous.
we miss you on Channel 4 News, but it's fantastic having you on Good Morning Britain.
Well, I feel really chuffed to have been allowed to come here. I mean,
I've got to say,
it's not my channel. It's, you know, I'm
No,
really
but
he also
welcome
read
back any time.
He also read the teas very well, didn't he?
Very well.
No, I'm going to study that and learn, Mr. Snow.
Yes.
Shall I give you the first line of the next bit?
Do.
Why don't you introduce the weather? Yes, with Alex Beresford.
You think I'm up to that? Let's take a look at the weather with Alex, who is at Cardiff Castle for, yes, St David's Day.
Love it.